Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we are going to discuss India's relationship with China in the context of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's visit to Beijing. The turbulent Sino-Indian relationship has been marked by conflict, competition as well as cooperation. The border dispute in the high Himalayas, the competing search for influence in South and Southeast Asia, and a burgeoning trade combined together define this complex relationship. India and China are the two largest developing countries of the world. Together, they represent 2/5 of the world's population. The nature of the bilateral relationship will impact not only the two countries, but has the potential of shaping international politics in the years to come. Both countries have agreed to 5 core principles of cooperation during President Xi Jinping's visit to India, and they included collaboration of multilateral affairs in order to address global challenges. Both are members of the BRICS grouping and recently announced the establishment of a BRICS Development Bank to compete with the World Bank and the IMF. So the early signs of a cooperative and shared leadership are there. The questions we are going to ask, however, today are: what is the broad trajectory of India-China relations? What holds back the realization of the full potential of the relationship? And more realistically, what is possible to do to tend this relationship to make it stronger? To discuss these issues, I have with me a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Leela Ponnappa, a formidable diplomat and India's former Deputy National Security Advisor. Dr. Alka Acharya, she's a professor and director of Institute of Chinese Studies in Delhi. And my old friend Ambassador M.K. Bhadrakumar, one of our most prominent foreign policy experts, eminent columnists, and each time I read him, I learn something new. So welcome all of you to the show. Let me begin with you, Ambassador Ponnappa. Could you briefly tell us what are the areas of conflict, competition and cooperation between India and China, and do they hold up this relationship or do they push it forward?
India and China deal with each other on 3 planes. There is the bilateral relationship, there is the regional equation, and there is the international platform where both are fairly major players. The bilateral relationship has seen certain ups and downs. Broadly, I would say it's an asymmetrical relationship. You have the boundary conflict, which is the essential area of difference. You have the growing economic relationship, as well as, I think, a certain civilizational consciousness in both countries. I wouldn't call it manifest destiny in the US sort of concept of the term, but I think each of them has had a certain place in Asia for a variety of reasons relating to modernization and globalization. These respective spheres are coming together. So it results in the kind of threat that India perceives between in the China-Pakistan relationship, where nuclear proliferation and a whole host of other strategic cooperation is seen as posing a two-front situation to India. Equally, I do believe that India and China have found the space to cooperate both at a bilateral and on the multilateral level in areas such as climate change, in a slow but growing understanding on issues concerning terrorism, in perhaps trying to engage with each other in Asia, in the Asia-Pacific region, on complex and difficult issues relating to freedom of navigation. I'm not talking about individual disputes like the South China Sea, but let us say the common interest in combating piracy, wherever it might occur.
But that we would cooperate with anybody else also.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think the fact that China has had a presence in the Indian Ocean for some years because of the piracy problem indicates that there is scope for cooperation. Okay. I think there are equally concerns with regard to trade, with regard to China's trading practices, and so on. Yeah. So it's a complex relationship. There are some areas of cooperation, clear areas of dispute to the point of perception of a threat, and the potential for greater understanding, even if not total resolution of many
Professor
problems.
Acharya, are we going to remain competitors in the military and economic sphere, or for territorial influence and in resource disputes, or do you think we can move towards cooperation?
I prefer to look at the India-China interaction and relationship in the paradigm of modernization and development. I mean, we have here two countries, Asians, neighbors, which are single-mindedly focused on their development. And in that process, both have needs, requirements, interests, which will bring them up against each other. Their need for energy, their need for security, their need for technology, their need for capital, their need for markets, need for labor. Now, these are going to be the areas where this relationship is going to evolve. The backdrop is one where we have a bad, bitter legacy of 1962 that has cast its shadow over many of the things that happen. But essentially, this is going to be about two countries finding a via media in these multiple areas as they move. So it's going to be a very, very multifaceted kind of a relationship.
Ambassador Bhadra Kumar, how seriously should one take people who say that despite our differing political systems, India and China are going to define the shape of the 21st century? Do they say it because they see a certain reality unfolding, or do they say it because they don't see the potential being realized and therefore telling you that, look, this is possible, but maybe you're not getting there?
You see, clearly this is a train of thought, which is disconcerting to a lot of people in the world, because, if you look at history, no one really abdicates, and there has been a certain correlation of forces in world politics, in modern history, and that is unraveling. It's very, very clear. In front of us, we can see that. And when two countries, two regional powers like India and China, they harmonize their thinking and they adopt a common approach towards the way the future institutions and future processes need to be choreographed, it will be very, very influential.
But are they doing that?
I think modestly they have done that in certain ways, but there's a long way to go because, essentially there is also a contradiction because every country will ultimately push its interests first, So, but there is a certain common ground, it's not yet a critical mass, but it has a potential, which is what is disconcerting. I go back to what Professor Acharya said. I entirely subscribe to the same point of view, that when you look at it from the developmental point of view, that in terms of the aspirations of both our ambitious powers, in terms of the aspirations of these two countries, there is a great potential to harmonize. There is a great potential to harmonize. The main stumbling block is not really the opposition that someone else is posing, but in terms of our own mindset.
All right, we need to take a break at this point. We'll continue with this interesting discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We were discussing Sino-Indian ties. Ambassador Bhadra Kumar, I stopped you mid-sentence before we went on the break, so would you like to complete what you're saying?
Well, to pick up the train of thought, that definitely there will be a resistance. It's in the grain of history, as I mentioned, that no one willingly abdicates. So when there are challenges, new entrants, there will be certain resistance. But that braking mechanism, I feel, is much less important than a kind of a cultural revolution that we need to undergo ourselves. There is a mindset. For example, a lot of time was wasted on this thesis called the string of pearls. Now the whole thing is completely absurd. When we need a paradigm shift. So when we look at, for example, the regional influence, we need to look at it, what matters. I think at this point in our development, what matters is regional stability and regional security. Influence comes as a result of a number of other factors.
All right.
So competing for influence and putting it right up front, I think we lost a lot of time. We could have worked, much more meaningfully on an entirely different matrix.
Okay. What I really wanted to ask you was actually shift gears and talk to you about, is this relationship being held hostage by the border dispute? And if it is, then how come the two sides, despite sort of 16 rounds of talks, unable to sort of focus single-mindedly and resolve it in some form or the other?
You see, I can only speak in terms of my Soviet experience. You know, I feel my overall assessment is that there can be genuinely a forward movement only if there is more of strategic understanding.
Okay.
Now, for 30 years, the Russians and the Soviets and the Chinese talked about it. But then, by the 90s or towards the end of the 80s, Gorbachev's time already, and certainly by the 90s, there is a different kind of relationship, different kind of atmospherics in the relationship developed. And within no time, the border was settled. So, you know, the block is there. And then honestly, let us ask ourselves that, you know, are we ready for a settlement? So I don't think border dispute is the problem.
All right.
You know?
But if border dispute is not a problem, Professor Acharya, what is this border defense cooperation agreement all about? Is it to sort of contain the border dispute so that it doesn't escalate? Or do you see it as a step further towards resolving the border dispute?
No, for one, I do not subscribe to the view that it has held the relationship back, because if we look at the last 15 years, particularly since the 93 and 96 agreements, and from the turn of the century especially, the relationship has moved in leaps and bounds. Trade is one indicator of it, but you can also see the density of the interaction at different levels. So I do not think it has held it back, and it flows from that paradigm that let not the border problem be may make the relationship a hostage. Now, the second thing is that it's a very complex issue. We've seen that there are myriad kind of aspects here which are not easily resolvable. Of course, there's a problem, why after 16 rounds no headway? But the fact remains that what both sides are doing is that pending a settlement, which everybody hopes for will come far soon, but pending it, at least ensure that nothing untoward happens. I mean, the status quo has been shown to be suddenly flaring up in various ways.
Let me take this
so the BDCO, in my view, is yet another mechanism to ensure that we do not really...
But let me take it to Ambassador Ponnappa. I mean, Indian analysts see a pattern in Chinese raising the border dispute in one form or the other before every high-level visit. So in 2006, you had the Chinese ambassador talking about Arunachal being a part of China just before then Chinese President Hu Jintao's visit, then Tepsang Valley before Premier Li Keqiang was coming, and now stapled visas just before Prime Minister Manmohan Singh goes. Now, I'm just wondering whether the Chinese do this not so much to hold the relationship hostage to the border dispute, but to sort of flag it, saying that, look, it's an important issue and it shouldn't get buried in sort of other important issues like trade and economic ties, which keep on progressing. But don't forget this, they don't want to put it on the back burner.
Well, I think the border dispute is a reality. And I don't think one should minimize either the fact of the dispute or the fact of the threat perception that India has had because of 1962 and a host of other developments. Equally, I don't think we should demonize the other side because they are both countries seeking their own development in today's world. So I think there are many things that happen at the same time. There are certain tactical steps that are taken. It's not just China that wants to flag the dispute. I think India too needs to do it. For a while, the border dispute, in fact, did hold the relationship hostage until the leadership on both sides demonstrated the political will, saying, yes, we have a problem, but let's move forward in other areas where we can. And that has, in fact, been happening. But to repeat what I said, let us not minimize the fact that it exists or the fact that India has some very serious concerns about how this is happening, despite the mechanisms that are put in place to maintain peace and tranquility.
All right. Bhadran, I want to ask you this. Do you think India has done the right thing by withdrawing the liberalized visa regime that was proposed, which would have allowed businessmen to come for more than 6 months, give them visas longer than 6 months, they could stay longer than 90 days at a time, allowed academics to come, because of the stapled visa issue in Arunachal?
You see, I can't understand this because, the stapled visa thing, I believe there has been a remarkable consistency on the part of the Chinese. They've always given only that way.
Earlier they used to refuse to give visas to Arunachalis, saying that they're Chinese citizens.
Saying that they didn't need visas.
Actually, as a matter of fact, it's slightly better that, that they overlook that and, they give a stapled visa. So I don't know whether we should link it, because the point is, you look at it from their point of view. One way looking at it is that if they put the visa stamp, they are recognizing that as part of India. Now, when you have a dispute, you can't insist that the other party should accept your point of view. There is a dispute, and they have a right to have their own perception, their own interpretation of it. So I think my feeling is that it is wrong on our part to have linked this up, because we are at a defining moment.
Yeah.
I think there has to be a much freer flow of people, and I think it's terribly important that we need Chinese businessmen to come in large numbers, and they have a friendly environment to work. There is a trade deficit which is against us.
We're going to discuss that.
Now we need more Chinese investments. For that, we need businessmen to come. So I think that should have gone ahead.
Alka, quickly,
slightly take a different take on this. I think some ingenuity can be brought on to resolve this matter, because it's clearly a very emotive issue, and every time it's going to happen, it's going to upset the apple cart. So the Chinese have shown a remarkable degree of ingenuity with regard to Taiwan, for instance, and so I think some via media can be found, which will not hurt our sentiments.
All right, I'll come back to you after the break. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing Sino-Indian ties. Ambassador Ponnappa, you wanted to say something, but before you say whatever you want to say, let me ask you a related question. Is it correct for India to link the visa issue for businessmen, which is really related to trade and investment, with the border dispute? Can't they be kept separate? I mean, would heavens fall if we kept the border dispute separately from the economic issues?
Well, I think it's China that has really linked the visa issue to the border dispute on the grounds of its position with regard to Arunachal. I think
it's a step forward, as Bhadran
well,
pointed
that's
out.
a matter of opinion. I don't agree with that view. I think it's a positively offensive type of move. I think China is very skillful and ingeniously uses these devices in order to probe, to provoke, to try to see how far
But why would they not want their businessmen to come India and invest in India? They're finding a new market.
Their businessmen are coming to India already. There has been absolutely no problem in China increasing its exports to India under the existing visa dispensation. There are asymmetries within that as well. So this is really what I meant by let's not minimize genuinely serious issues while moving forward where it is possible. Both need to be done.
All right. Ambassador Bhadra Kumar, let's talk about trade. You know, on the trade front, India and China seem to be doing very well. You know, trade is expected to go up from 66 billion in which was last year to about 100 billion by 2015. No. But there's a huge trade deficit. There's a trade imbalance, and this kind of imbalance cannot work. And why is China therefore not opening up its IT sector and pharmaceutical sector to Indian investments?
Bharat, you know, it is, let me correct this, that the trade is dropped. That's the actual fact. It's not an upward curve, it's dropped. And it is, the danger is that it is going to probably languish. You know, because, you know, the kind of things that we can export to China and so on, there are a lot of complications there. The deficit is very much there. The point is not that. The point is that let's look at the environment, you know, the Asian environment, the Asian drama that is going to unfold. We saw the last 2 weeks, the Chinese leaders, you know, touring the whole region. Now, on the one hand, China is very keenly pushing for the regional free trade agreements by 2015. Now, whether we like it or not, can be subverted, we can't subvert it. We need to be part of it.
Absolutely.
Secondly, Southeast Asia's infrastructure is dated and it needs a new infrastructure. China is offering Maritime Silk Route, which is restructuring the whole infrastructure. They are proposing a bank for this purpose, in something like the Asian Development Bank for this purpose. And what is China's approach? All these countries that you're talking about, whether it is you know, some of the ASEAN countries or others, they have a maritime dispute too. But those countries are taking it. Malaysia, where the Chinese president went, they're talking about increasing the trade volume to $170 million, 3 times, 300% in a matter of 3 years.
Okay.
So the environment we have to see, we are going to be left behind.
Okay. Are we going to be left behind, Alka?
No, you know, it's a question of some perceptions as well. I mean, it's not just that China has a problem. I mean, many other countries have complained about the fact that we do not have an investment-friendly environment, that we have huge numbers of red tape and bureaucracy. So it's a question of first getting our own act together in terms of whether do we want foreign investment, do we want businessmen to come and engage with us. In that case, some hard decisions have to be taken. I mean, that's really the problem.
All right.
And the big story that is happening around. So one is internally, how do we want this to come in? And two, are we part of the big story, or are we just going to be sitting and watching China take the script?
Well, we are part of the big story. So therefore, let me ask you, what are our stakes in the South China Sea? Is it merely to sort of ensure freedom of movement of Indian ships? Because they say half the world's merchant fleet passes through South China Sea. So is it just that, or is it because we've got interest in oil exploration and it's important for our Look East policy and our relationship with ASEAN countries?
Well, the South China Sea is the route to the Pacific and the west coast of the United States, with which India has a very healthy and booming trade. So very clearly, it's very closely integrated with it. But let me go back to the issues of trade. I don't see the trade deficit as a major problem, because much as we tell our trading partners that have a negative balance with us that it's really a question of respective competitiveness, I think that's true of China as well. The big picture with regard to trade really is what India does in order to make itself competitive, how it markets itself. I mean, you talked about the numbers for trade, but the fact is that the bulk of it is constituted by iron ore, which is a basic raw material. It's a colonial item. And I don't think that particularly is something to push for. Kaveh, the larger interest with regard to Southeast Asia, of course, India has to engage fully. We've had our ambivalences with regard to trade. Sometimes we have taken wise decisions, but equally we have been hesitant. Whereas I think we have to...
Well, the Indian Navy chief says that he's willing to send his warships to protect Indian investment in South China Sea. So what do you make of that?
I think a statement like that has to be taken in terms of the spirit and not in terms of the letter.
Okay.
I think we have to look at capabilities, we have to look at political will and intent, and India's engagement with Southeast Asia certainly is seen as positive and not as a threat.
All right. So, Ambassador Bhadra Kumar, well, Southeast Asia is still far off. So, let's talk about South Asia. A lot of smaller South Asian countries are attracting Chinese investment because they need it for their own growth. So, what does it do to India's influence in countries like Maldives, Nepal and Sri Lanka, who are actually, instead of looking at India, are looking at China for investment?
See, our prerogative, our right should be to see whether Chinese are doing anything in our neighborhood which is inimical to our interests. China also has to regard these countries as very important neighboring countries because this is a very important waterway. And China is also developing communication links to these through these areas. So this is why I mentioned earlier about the string of pearls and so on. I think we worked ourselves up. There was a certain type of mindset which is completely unwarranted. Now, tourists go in such large numbers today to Maldives. What is preventing Indians from going there? The Chinese are going there and they are bringing in a lot of money to that country. Their influence will certainly go up. Does it affect India's interests? It doesn't. Hambantota port development. Again, how does it affect India's interests? This is a port which is project which is offered to India first. In the first instance. And I think even Sino-Pakistan relationship is undergoing a transformation. It is no longer India-centric as our pundits imagine. I think it is connected in many ways to many other major concerns that China has vis-a-vis its Malacca dilemma and its relationship, its rivalry with the United States, and the Silk Road it's planning towards Europe, Gulf, and so on.
Last word to we are running out of time. Last word to you.
The question. Yes.
Not only you can add to what Bhadran has said, but also people have often said that our relationship with Bangladesh and Myanmar has been made complex because of the looming presence of China. But this time around, China is offering a Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar trade corridor, which can then be backed with a trade agreement. So you actually see the potentiality for cooperation in this region. Do you agree with this? Do you think that cooperation is going to take place?
Unquestionably. I think the question that we have to ask ourselves really is, how soon is the Indian growth story going to pan out and how successful would it be? But that is the key. I mean, already 5 years of 7.5% growth or thereabouts has your neighbors dealing with you differently. So the question is, will you be the driver of the economic processes in the region, and how will you take your neighbors with you? That is where we have to put our ideas on. Otherwise, I'm afraid China is going to take the agenda setting kind of a story.
We can do it along with China, but we've run out of time. So I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your views on Sino-Indian relations with our viewers. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye.